Okay, we talked about at the kinematic level, or at the body segment level, I can't find what I want, that degrees of freedom are the different or independent ways that a joint can move. So we use the example of what? Elbow joint has 1 degree of freedom. Here's a range from extension to flexion, but it only moves in one plane. And we use the example of the wrist having more degrees of freedom. So it has this degree of freedom, and also around those axes. So it has at least 3 degrees of freedom. So we're talking about coordination is constraining those individual degrees of freedom to kind of work as a team. Okay, another word for that is synergy. Okay, these individual degrees of freedom can be constrained to work in a synergistic fashion. All right, and that is true kind of at the kinematic level, and it's also true, well, kinematics are the result of muscle activation. And what example were we using at the end of the day to talk about neuromuscular synergies? Well, before we get to that, what was the example I was using, which I would like to use today, if I could find it? What was the last overhead we had up? Right, so we had the example of when we raised the arm, we had the pictures of neuromuscular activation. I just had to draw it here real quick. So this would represent time 0 when I started my arm. We had different lines of muscle activation. Okay, so this is the arm muscle, and the rest of these are leg. Let's call them 1, 2, and 3. And we talked about let's finish that off. Every time we raised our arm, that you've got this patterned activity. Okay? And that patterned activity, we said, is responsible for what? Controlling our posture. Okay, we activate our leg muscles such that when we raise our arm, we don't fall over. So every time we raise our arm, we get this pattern of activity, and that relates to synergies and degrees of freedom. How? Okay, at the very end, I know it's a struggle, is that each of these muscles could be controlled independently. Okay? In theory, each of these are an independent degree of freedom. So you want to start relating in your head degrees of freedom and control. Okay, I could activate each one of these muscles individually, meaning they're an individual degree of freedom that I have to account for, that I have to control for.